Good morning. These are the days that Celtic fans and the team are supposed to aspire to be involved in. I cannot say that seems to be the attitude, Alison, about the Bayer Leverkusen game tonight. It seems to be approaching with dread rather than excitement at the moment for Celtic fans, given the recent form. Is that something that you think is a fair reflection on things at the moment?
Absolutely. I think it's a fair reflection. I think if you look at the evidence in front of you, if you look at where Bayer Leverkusen are and the capability they have of ensuring a fairly harrowing evening for Celtic tonight, I think it would be wise to view it with some trepidation. I think Celtic have looked very soft in games, particularly in a European context, in terms of shipping goals and shipping goals quickly. A sense of when they concede one, quite often there's another coming right at the back of it. I think if you look at that game over in Seville a few weeks ago and conceding 4 goals in a very short period of time, I think there's justifiable reason to look at tonight's game with some apprehension.
I totally understand the concession of the goals fear, but Celtic went to Seville and scored 3 times. So I think that Bayer Leverkusen are probably a tighter knitted team than Real Betis. That's not based on too much evidence. I haven't sat down and watched the Bundesliga too much this season, but I think just going by the quality of the side, I think they're the top seeds, so that they should be harder to break down. But Celtic did go to Seville and score 3 times. They have beaten good teams at Parkhead in the Europa League in recent years, Lazio, Leipzig, who are regularly in the Champions League now. It's not out with the realms of possibility. I think unlikely is probably a fair way of putting it, but possible.
Anything in football is possible. As you've seen, no one would have backed Celtic to beat Barcelona or many teams that have come to Celtic Park in a European context. But what you would have to say is if you assess the evidence that's in front of you, it looks unlikely. It's not to say it's impossible, but I think so at times this season Celtic looked like a team who always had goals in them. They looked capable of scoring goals. I'm not sure that you've seen that quite in the same vein in recent weeks. I think it's felt a bit stale, a bit pedestrian at times against teams that wouldn't have the same quality that you'll see tonight from Leverkusen. So I think there is cause to view the game with a bit of apprehension in terms of the kind of night that Celtic might expect to be in. The other aspect of that is I think at the minute, I think European considerations are probably secondary to domestic affairs. I think in some ways people would sacrifice any kind of European progress if it meant getting a solid ground again in terms of the league. So in that respect, I think there's been suggestions about an earlier return than anticipated for Callum McGregor, a possibility of some minutes for Furuhashi, and I think these would be valuable this evening, and maybe not so much in terms of what they would offer against Leverkusen, but what they might potentially bring to Pittodrie on Sunday if you can start to bring players back and get a stronger hand.
Yeah, Celtic did look like scoring goals at will at times earlier this season, but the main difference between that and now is that Kyogo Furuhashi was playing in those games. I think that it's a bit of a slight, to be honest, that the absence of him can disrupt the rhythm so incredibly, even though he's been in the door for 10 minutes.
I think both Furuhashi and Callum McGregor are integral to how Ange Postecoglou wants his team to play in terms of the pressing and the movement and the high intensity. I think both of them are fundamental to those principles. I think when you take them out, I think they are quite a significant loss. I think one of them would have been a loss. I think both of them together has significantly hindered Celtic. I do think that the squad should be strong enough. I think if you go through the squad, it should have been strong enough to cope. But I think for both of those players, Celtic don't have their equal in terms of what they offer and what they bring. I don't think anyone else plays that role that McGregor has played quite successfully this season. I don't think there's anyone else who has the same capability. And I would say the same in terms of Furuhashi. I think his energy lifted Celtic. I think his quality went through the team. I think you could sense the positivity that he brought, the way he energised people around him. And it may be damning that there's an inability to cope with their loss, but at the same time, I think you're looking at two players who are really fundamental to how that team sets up.
But there are two good wingers in the Celtic team on form at the moment. Jota has only played a couple of games, really, but he's started fairly well. And Abada, I think you were right in your assertion a week or so ago that if Furuhashi hadn't started so well, then Abada would probably be the main man under the spotlight. Is it that one in the middle that's the missing piece of the jigsaw?
I think so. I think Ajeti's a very different player from Furuhashi. I think his movement at times frustrates. I think you look at some of the chances on Sunday and you're maybe tearing your hair out a little bit if you're Ange Postecoglou and thinking, I can think of at least two where you're thinking that ought to have been a goal, but it can happen. But I just think he's a very different player in terms of his mobility and his vision and what he brings. I think given the quality that the two wingers provide, he really should be doing better at the minute.
And what about midfield then tonight? Because McCarthy's come in for scrutiny, some criticism, some praise, but certainly a lot of scrutiny either way, and Soro as well. In front of him, you've got Turnbull and Rogic, and the pair of them have looked good on occasion together, but I think sometimes there seems to be the understanding and assertion that there's just not enough movement, not enough energy when they're both in the team in midfield, especially against a team like Bayer Leverkusen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think McCarthy's a difficult one. I think he's played so little football in recent seasons. I think quite a lot of people were surprised at the contract he was given, the length of contract that he was given the fitness issues and the lack of game time prior to his arrival at Celtic this summer. I think he's maybe been put in before being properly match fit. I thought he looked really off the pace against Livingston a few weeks ago. I think he struggled to link with the likes of Turnbull and Rogic. I think it seems fractured at times. I don't think there's a fluency there. I'm not sure that the balance of the midfield is quite right when McGregor's out of it. Rogic, I think we know, possesses quality within games. We know that he can do something out of nothing. He can create something, but he is not a player in recent seasons that you've expected to play 90 minutes back to back repeatedly. I think sometimes you get the best out of him when he's used almost sporadically, or he's not starting every game and expected to last the duration because of issues that he has had. Turnbull, I think you go back 12 months, he wasn't even anywhere near the starting lineup. He wasn't a first team regular at Celtic yet. He's 21. I think there's still a considerable weight of expectation on a player at a time when the club has been faltering and the team has been in poor form and attracting criticism. I think it's fair to say that he's at an age where he could probably still do with coming into a settled and winning team to see the best out of him.
There's a couple of words flowing into the comments here with regards to Soro, fear, nerves, worst. I mean, is it really that bad?
I think it's a painful watch. Sometimes I think he plays on the edge a bit as it is. The impression that I have gleaned over recent weeks is that he looks inhibited. I think there's a sense of being aware of having lost the trust, maybe of his manager potentially and of the crowd. And I think that sometimes can be quite difficult to see in a player. I think he looks bereft of confidence, and I think that can add at times a tension to your play that's never going to enhance the quality of your performance.
So what does Celtic do then about this game tonight and the Aberdeen game on Sunday? Because if Celtic are beaten by Bayer Leverkusen tonight, it pretty much ends any hope that you would think really of getting to the next stage, losing the first two games. But Sunday is probably more of a must-win game than tonight is, despite what's on the line for the Europa League.
I think must-win game in terms of league context seems to be the narrative of the last month. I think we've been saying it now ahead of of the last 3 games or so, the last 3 or 4 games, I think it's accurate. I don't think Celtic can afford to go to Pittodrie and not come away with a win. I think you need to go and you need to win by whatever means necessary. I don't think Celtic can afford to lose further ground in terms of the league table. At the minute, it remains 6 points between them and Rangers. I think it's not insurmountable if you can piece together a run of form and you can bring back players that you know will significantly enhance and strengthen the side. I think goals will come back. I think the confidence will come back with that. I think Celtic will benefit towards it deeper into October when you do have the likes of McGregor, Furuhashi, James Forrest, Christopher Julian coming back, Juranovic when he's back from the hamstring injury. I think you'll have more options in terms of personnel and more flexibility too in how you play and in how you set up in a tactical sense. But I think until that point, it's very important not to concede further ground. It's about finding a way to win. And in that respect, I think Pittodrie on Sunday trumps anything this evening.
2 teams, though, who aren't in the greatest form on Sunday. Celtic and Aberdeen. Stephen Glass has really hit a bit of a road bump this season after starting it pretty well with 2 consecutive wins. It's the same with Celtic. They both started the season pretty well. Celtic's defeat to Hearts aside, and it's just slowly tailed off for both, or maybe actually quite suddenly tailed off for both. So it'll be interesting to see on Sunday if one of them can grab it by the scruff of the neck and start to find a wee bit of form again, because, I mean, it's not going well for either. I think that there's still enough goodwill and enough recognition that it's still at an early stage for Postecoglou. I think for Aberdeen it's a bit different because Glass had about 6 weeks or so maybe towards the end of last season to come in and familiarise himself with the club and what he wanted to do, whereas Postecoglou was kind of just told to get on with it at the start of the season, it felt like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think both managers are under pressure. I think whatever may be said publicly, I'm sure both will be feeling an element of frustration at the minute. I think Aberdeen haven't won for their last 8 games. I think there's no manager that survives that without a few sleepless nights, I don't think. I've seen a bit of Aberdeen this season in various games. I think they struggle in both thirds. They seem fairly soft at the back and an inability to convert chances. It's up to Celtic to try and manipulate any weaknesses and vulnerabilities that they see. But of course, Aberdeen's point of view will be to do exactly the same. And I would go back to a problem that I think has affected Celtic from last season, which is a mental frailty and an issue with dealing with adversity within games and coming back after losing goals. I think you can sense the lack of confidence at times within the side and the lack of belief. But I think in that respect, tonight could be important if there is a possibility of players like McGregor and Furuhashi getting some game time this evening. I think that could underpin greater inclusion in this team ahead of Sunday's game, which would be considerable.
Well, what's acceptable from Celtic tonight? A couple of comments coming in here. One from Jim Stevenson saying that it's not about actually winning games, just as long as Celtic aren't thumped. And there's Daniel saying that nobody expects Celtic to win, but even if they do get beaten heavily, there'll still be a meltdown after the game. I think that's just probably the way of football fans and the media. Sometimes overreaction can be fairly regular in the wake of such defeats. But what is acceptable for Celtic this evening? Is it as long as they're in the game until the latter stages of it, or do they need to go and take the game to Bayer Leverkusen and make their life a misery? How does it work?
I think it's about mentality tonight. I think it's about how you approach the game. I think it will be interesting to see how the manager sets up. I think this is a game where there would be an argument for some element of pragmatism, for compromising on the philosophy that we know he wishes to adhere to and to stick with. But I think tonight you could potentially tweak it. I think we've seen in earlier games, I think he played McGregor and Sorrell together. So there has been at times an element of that previously in earlier European games. I think, but ultimately I think it's about how Celtic approach the game. Can you see a decent level of performance against a strong European team? And I think if you can get that it augurs well in the sense of just building the team up again, and because it's been a fairly morale-sapping month.
So this evening for Celtic, it's more about performance rather than result, but on Sunday, win at all costs against Aberdeen.
I would think so. I think the league takes absolute priority at the minute.
Okay, well, we'll see how it plays out. I wonder if the pessimism of a lot of the Celtic fans in the comments here will be proved wrong, if Celtic can sneak something from this game tonight. So thanks for joining us, Alison. Thanks for joining us in the comments. And remember, you can subscribe to The Celtic Way now for only £1 a month for the first 2 months. And that's a cracking deal for everything that we're offering on the website. And also subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you can get alerts when we're online and when new videos are uploaded, whether it's podcasts like this or whether it's tactical insights and interviews. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.